I'm BC Kagan, and I'm a photographer. I started photographing rock bands in Boston in the late 70s, mostly punk rock, new wave, alternative, kind of cool bands. And I am talking today with Arthur Johnson, who was a drummer, or is a drummer, sorry, for a band called Come. And I say is because apparently Come is still playing. And
In theory.
you can hire them for bar mitzvahs.
Yes, that's right. We're available for weddings and cruises. Yes.
And also he was the drummer for the Barbecue Killers, who I don't, are they still playing?
Well, our singers passed away. We have not played a show since 1988.
Okay, so yeah, that's a was.
89, sorry. Yeah,
So he was the drummer for the Barbecue Killers,
that's right.
but was for Come and still could be if you need them to play at your event. So we are, today we're talking about my book, which is called Shameless Distortion. It's a book of my photographs that I took, starting from 1979 and going up into the 90s. And also in that book is an excerpt from a collection of stories that I have that are about things that happened while I was photographing these bands. So we are talking today about my book, but Arthur and I are also working toward a podcast that is going to be based on the Taking Tea with Monsters and talking about the stories and, going outside the stories a little bit into some of the naughty details that I didn't put in the book because I didn't want to get censored.
Naughty and naughty. Naughty, Knotty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Arthur Johnson is also an editor, you just learned. So yeah, I think that covers what I wanted to cover, because this is part two. There is a part one. So if you're seeing this first, go ahead and listen to it if you like.
Sure.
And then also go and listen to the other one.
And I think where we, one thing I wanted to start off this, which would be continuing a bit from what we talked about on the previous exciting episode of this podcast, was that we were talking about when you were pulling the book together and you were working with your designer Tillman. And I think you said that when you first conceived of the book, but maybe even when you were starting to work with Tillman, you were expanding beyond the idea of just 35 photos, and that was growing, but also you are not concerned about necessarily pinning down the dates or places for a lot of these photos, and Tillman felt differently about it.
Yes, but didn't admit it right away.
Oh, he didn't. Okay.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, sure, I get it, whatever. Oh, sorry, I think I'm about to sneeze.
That's all right.
We didn't plan for that, did we? Well,
I never plan for a sneeze. It always just comes upon me.
You know how when you announce it, then it goes away.
So frustrating. Well, that's a good technique.
Yeah.
That's what all the famous broadcasters do. They just say they're about to sneeze and then they avoid it.
I have never heard that before.
It's because they don't tell their business secrets.
So first off, I want to say, just so I don't get beat up by anybody, I mentioned this before, that there was a designer before. Her name was Alexandra. Yeah, Alexandra. She was also referred a friend of a friend. And she had actually already established, there were some pages that were already established. So it gave
Oh.
Tillman an idea about, what it was. And Alexandra actually lives in Brooklyn, I think. So
Mhm.
we met physically a few times, unlike Tillman, who I've, never met. We could cross each other and not even know.
Oh, so you don't even know what he looks like?
Do I know what I imagine that he's very tall and thin, but you know what? It may be that I am just juxtaposing the looks of the bongo musician who referred me to
Was
him.
that, by the way, I looked that, was it James
No,
Maestro? No, it wasn't him either.
sorry. James is the guy that owns the guitar bar.
Okay. Well, the other two members that I found online were Rob Norris and Frank
It's
Giannini.
Rob. It was
Rob
Rob.
Norris. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I'm going to talk about Tillman, and then I'm going to hopefully swing back and tell you a story about from when Alexandra was still working on the book.
Okay.
So the thing about Tillman was he was like, yeah, I get it, sure. We'll just say, it was around 1988 and I'm pretty sure it was at the Channel or the Rat or whatever. And then he would be, like I wouldn't talk to him for a few days and he was like, I found out that this was actually, at 4:30 in the afternoon in the tea room at the Rat. And, he would get all these details and come back to me and I was like, okay, great. I said, that's good. The more information, I'm sure people do want that, but it's not that important to me. And as the book went on and there were more and more pictures, he started to do more and more research. And, he would say to me, oh, well, the expression, I went down the rabbit hole, I had never really used that or heard it that much, but he would say, oh, well, he would get into the research. And then, which seemed so unfair, he was getting really upset with me because he was spending so much time that he wasn't being paid for to do this research. And I was, yeah, it's, I didn't want that. I mean, it's great to have it, and I understand that you think it's important, but it's, I think it's
I
not.
think it's a natural thing, and I don't think it would just be Tillman. I think when people look at photographs like this, it's a natural thing to think, maybe not where it was, but when it was. You kind of wonder, like, how old were these people then? And like, was this when I was listening to the band or?
But I was giving them circas. This is circa,
Right.
not, you get a
Uh-huh.
journal, this is,
Yes, it
we're
was
not after the
Circus.
grandchildren. This is,
It,
you
it was
hand out.
Circus Maximus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I wasn't, most of the time I had a clue about around the time, but
Yeah.
I didn't know. Yeah, it was the first show they did. It wasn't the all ages one. It wasn't, and then, it turns out in the first place, people, this is something I like to talk about because I think it's really important and probably really pisses people off in New York, which I don't mind. Um, Boston, people play Boston. Playing Boston, in those years, I don't know how people feel now. And this is why Boston is so important. It's a college town. And the radio in Boston, which is very important to bands when you've put out a record or even your first record or any record, you're trying to sell records. Now I don't know what people are trying to sell, streaming or whatever. In terms of radio, the radio in Boston, the commercial radio, the bigger stations follow what the college stations do. They wouldn't survive if they didn't follow the form of what college radio did. And they're very influential and important college stations operating in Boston: WERS, WMBR, which is MIT, ERS is Emerson. Yeah, I'm sure there are some I'm missing.
HRB at Harvard, did you mention that?
Yes. And so, like I said, the other major stations that, sadly, because there are some really great college stations in New York as well, as there are really good colleges here.
And in New Jersey,
There's some good colleges in New Jersey too.
good college stations in New Jersey. Yeah. Mhm.
I think, oh, anyway,
FMU.
don't eat said with me. So,
Mhm.
so, um, that is why playing Boston was more important. You're gonna get the exposure that you want. And what I was trying to finish saying was that in New York, that doesn't happen. Commercial radio does not care what college radio is doing here. And, you know, for better or for worse, and I'm gonna say for worse, in my opinion, for worse, because what commercial radio plays here is not stuff that I like, but I'm
Mhm.
sure other people like it. Um, so, um, anyway, yeah, I just thinking one, but I'm sure it happens lots of times. I was a big fan of a band called the Skids, an English band called the Skids, and on their first tour to the United States, skipped over New York completely and came to Boston. You
Mhm.
know, if they had to make a choice, it's more important to play Boston than to
Mhm.
play New York. And I know that seems, you know, hard to believe. If you like
Mhm.
Broadway, you think
Mhm.
everything is centered in New York. No,
Well,
this,
you think media capital and everything, you think a lot of the magazines are based. That's where they're gonna,
yeah,
that's where they want to play.
yes,
But
exactly, but no. So, why was I saying this to
I
you?
think we
And
were talking about
um,
identifying where the shows were, perhaps, or like,
yeah,
you know,
anyway, so in general, Tillman was regularly going down the rabbit hole, and I think staying up very late at night. He has a wife, he has a daughter. This
Mhm.
was causing problems, and he was getting mad at me, which was like, I'm sorry, I don't remember when Bow Wow Wow was playing. Oh, why I was going into that whole thing about Boston is that, you know, Bow Wow Wow has played Boston a lot. They're still playing Boston,
I
which is
saw them play in Boston myself. Well, after much later than when you took the photos. Yeah.
there. And
So
I
it's
have,
a kind of impressive though that he was able to get that information. Even, I mean,
well, he's good at Photoshop, so he knows how to
yes,
use a computer,
I
but it
guess
was
he's
taking
good.
him time. And yeah, and we were arguing about that. I mean, I just, you know, my thing was stop doing it.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think his thing was, I can't. And it's your fault, and you should have known. I don't even know if he ever said should have, but he was very upset. And he gave me this, there was, I like to, this is like my argument with my guitarist in Swingers New York with Tim, Swingers New York. Swingers
Swingers
New York.
Resort. Mhm.
Um, Tillman made this analogy, which I thought was really funny, not at the time while we were yelling at each other. But he said, if I got into a cab in Union Square, this is a, you know, a New York analogy, and I told the guy I was going to 34th Street, and when we got to 34th Street, I said, oh no, really, I meant 125th Street. And expected the cab driver to take me, you know, to turn the meter off and take me to Harlem after I said 34th Street. You know, that would, you know, that's not, you know, he's making that comparison. And I thought that was really funny. And I said, you know, Tillman, if I get in a cab and the cab driver doesn't turn the meter on immediately, I will
Mhm.
get out of the cab.
Mm.
So that is not a good analogy, because I would never ask a cab driver to take me somewhere that I hadn't told him that I
Well,
wanted to.
it seems like the better analogy would be if he's the cab driver and you're the, or no, I'm trying to figure out where who's who in the analogy. But if you get in the cab and you ask him to take him to 35th and he decides to get you there by going to Harlem and then coming back, that's more of the analogy of what Tillman was doing. You were still trying to get the book done, but
Just,
he was adding this whole extra
you know,
route.
and it was great to take the trip to Harlem. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, let me ask you also, notably, you don't include any text at all on the pages with the photos. There's not even a caption or a name of the band or anything. You just wanted the photos to stand on their own and have no distractions.
I think there was even a plan maybe not to have page numbers, but then how could the page numbers help to refer to the list in the back?
Yeah, you would need that for the
Oh,
index. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can make it really tiny. Yes, it is. I'm kind of thinking that this is a Gary Winogrand thing that I got from him, or maybe adapted the thing about having the photograph to focus on and not. There were a lot of rules that other people probably didn't understand, but I did, and I liked all of them. There
So you
was,
say that's more common in photography books to not have any captions with photos, to have photos
oh no, I
reproduced
have
with,
no idea.
oh, okay.
I just think it's Gary's, theory about how you should look at photographs or how you should present your photographs. I mean, he
Mhm.
had some, I don't know if this is connected, but like I remember, him saying, well, if you take a photograph and then you really reduce it down, like instead of having an 8x10, you do like a 4x5 of this image. He said, and you're just making it precious. You're affecting how people are going to respond to this image by making it, so cute and little.
Mhm.
He didn't say cute and little, I'm saying that, but he didn't use the word precious. So we had rules about how photographs should be seen. Although, yeah, I have had this big rule because I don't crop my photographs, and that's from Gary. Um, So those black lines, this is an important thing. This is a photography thing. And this is why this is a photography book. Those black lines that you see around the photograph are not a design element. That when
That's actually showing what's just beyond the photograph in the negative.
yes, it's
That's
out.
interesting. So it's not a frame that was added in putting the book
No,
together.
but people do that. But
Yeah.
I will guarantee you, in that book, every black frame around, people do try to fake that full frame look, but
Mhm.
every black line that you see is indicating that that is the photograph I took at the time. And it
Cool.
is what Arthur was saying for anybody who has never looked at a roll of film. There's an image area on the negative, and outside the image area, it's clear. And then, the sprocket holes, which people are sometimes kind of familiar with, and that
Mhm.
whole area outside the image area goes clear, and then it goes into the sprocket holes, which is also clear. So, and sometimes people use that part, even with the sprocket holes, to create a frame around their picture. Um,
Mhm.
but so every single picture there is full frame. And this comes to mind that the picture of the Go-Go's, if you look at the picture of the Go-Go's, get that out right now, Arthur.
I'm pulling it up because
You
it's
will,
the first, other than the cover of the Buzzcocks, it's the first
yes,
photo in the book. Yes. So here's the photo.
if you look, I thought it was in the middle of the frame. See, I don't even know my own pictures. If you look to the far left, you see something black on the sidewalk there. No, the other side, sorry.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I
the
can't
other
touch
side,
that, but yeah.
the other left.
Yeah.
As they say in cartoons. Um, uh, that's my equipment. That's my lighting equipment.
Oh, really?
Put on the sidewalk and didn't move it, didn't see it when I shot it, was
Huh.
too busy focusing on the girls. Yeah, so that actually shows up and,
Do you remember how that photo, did it get reprinted in a magazine or a newspaper? Do you remember how it was used?
not the first time, no.
Mm.
Um, they, that's Lansdowne Street, they were playing Spit maybe, or what was the bigger one? Well, you don't know because this
I
is,
don't know back then, yeah.
but that pizza place was down at the other side of the block.
Oh,
And I think they were hungry. The other notable thing for me, very important story that people really want to hear. Charlotte, well, it's about touring life. Charlotte didn't have any tights to wear that night. So this was around sound check that we did the pictures, and I was going to come back. This is terrible because I often, say that I didn't come back, but the terrible thing is that I don't remember a lot of these shows. I have a very clear memory about the time I spent with the bands and photographing them, but not much memory about the shows. Anyway, I did go back because, she was talking about, what she was gonna do, because she didn't have anything to wear that night. And I said, look, I'm gonna go home and I am coming back. And down the block from where I live, there's a little tiny hosiery store. And I can go buy you some tights and bring them back. And so, yeah, I don't know if she asked for green. She must have, because I bought her green. And it seems like if you didn't ask for that, that would have been like, ooh, what am I supposed to do with these? So, yeah, it was like a very well stocked, but I don't even think you could walk into it. It was like, what are those called when there's a guy who's like on the door frame. Yep, what do you want? We got it.
Oh, the old fashioned kind of store where they would go in and pull it off the shelf for you. And
Yeah, like that kind of thing.
Nice.
It was like,
Yeah.
but this is Boston, so you don't really, wasn't a common thing, but it was, good use of the real estate. So yes, I bought Charlotte tights that night.
Mhm,
I don't know whether she remembers that. I do.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so yeah, no, I don't remember where that was first published. I'm
Hmm.
kind of thinking Trouser Press, but maybe not. The main ones for a long time, Boston
Yeah.
Rock, Trouser Press.
That does lead into what I had as my next first question,
Okay.
because I was going to ask you, you mentioned that sometimes you were doing assignments, but they weren't prepaid assignments. Magazine might contact you and say, can you go to this show and take photos, and we'll look at the photos you get. And that's part of how you ended up taking photos of some of the bands, but there must have been other times where maybe you just went because you were interested in the
Yes.
musicians.
Well, so what would happen is that, like Trouser Press, for instance, would say, we're gonna do, uh, it might have been for them because there is actually, I do have a cover, a Trouser Press cover with the GoGos. It's a
Hmm.
color photograph on the cover. I don't know if they bought that after the fact, but anyway, they might say, we're doing, a GoGos, issue, and can you go and do this? Now, I don't get paid. There is no guarantee. You get paid upon publication. Trouser Press had a very small budget, so you're waiting
Hmm.
for this money, and it's not gonna be a lot. And, um, so that's one way. Uh, the, most money I would make is if I was actually engaged to do a promotional shoot for a band. Now, in those cases, a lot of times those jobs were related to Boston bands, um, because I was in Boston. And
They knew your work and they knew you.
yeah, exactly. And or that it's possible that somebody in the record company that was in New York, they don't want to, they would cost more to send somebody from New York, so it helped them to have Boston people that they could use. Um, on the other hand, though, I would have liked to have been sent to New York sometimes, like to say, because this is, about how I feel about photography. Oh, that's so nice. You picked me because I'm in the neighborhood, not because I'm a great shooter. I mean, anyway, but you want the
Well,
money.
I'd like to think it was both.
Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah.
So the thing is that while it's great that somebody has hired you like a promo shoot, you are guaranteed, if you're hired by the record company, you are guaranteed, they ask you what you charge for a promotional shoot and you tell them, and, their expenses, they're gonna pay the lab fees, blah, blah, blah. And that's great. It's one of those things I think like, oh, that's the kind of thing like my family would like to hear. Like, that sounds like a real job. But photographically, I actually don't like to be hired, and it's something that Gary kind of hinted at during my time with him, uh, for everybody, not personally, that, talking about being what he would call a hired gun. Now, it's very hard for a young photographer to hear that. They think, wouldn't it be great if somebody would hire me to blah, 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 blah. But he talked about not wanting to be a hired gun, stopping that because he had been a magazine photographer and he
Mm.
didn't want to be that anymore. And I did come to understand when you're hired by somebody, you are in your mind while you're photographing thinking, what does my client need?
Right. What
You're
will make
not
them look
thinking,
good? Right. Yeah.
well, what is, you shoot more film than you need to because you have to satisfy a
Mm.
client. Um,
And
and,
and
and
if not,
that's,
just briefly in that situation, are they paying for a certain number of photos or just the time? Is it just based on how much time you spend or just vary?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Because this is gonna sound like boasting, but why not? Because it's true. I think one of the things that people were often surprised about, and they liked me because of, I would hear comments coming back from people.
They're all winners. Yeah.
They could, yes, I could produce a lot of usable photographs in a very short period of time.
Do you think
And
that's because you were more deliberate when you were taking photos? You're not just like you weren't like just clicking, 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 thinking something will come out good out of this. You were very much more like, I know
God,
when I
no
see a good.
photographer should be thinking that, but
Yeah.
well, I do know that I'm very focused
Mhm.
um, when I'm shooting. I
And you
think
talked to
I go into
we're
a zone,
yeah.
and sometimes, when I would go to clubs and stuff, I was I wouldn't have much time. So I knew I had to produce as many good images as I could in a short period of time.
Well,
Um,
you've told me before, and one of your advantages that you have over other photographers is that you bring your own lighting, and so you're not using a flash. You're having set lighting, so you know how this is going to look when you take the before you take the photo. No.
yes, part A to what you just said.
Hmm.
You just Edie Sedgwick yourself.
I know. I
By the
did.
way, I am now stating we are doing this project. I'm hoping the little indicator is not in the middle of my face when I'm looking at it, not in the recording. Anyway, we have not posted anything. We've had a couple of Zoom recordings, and we already have a catchphrase, and we have not posted anything yet.
Hmm.
And I am very, very fond of the catchphrase. And at some point, uh, maybe you'll hear the story that goes with the catchphrase and where it comes from. But it's, well, I'll explain it to a certain extent, is that I was telling a story and Arthur suggested that a person that I was talking about was Edie Sedgwick before it was supposed to be the punchline.
So sorry.
And so I I now have the catchphrase, which I really like, and I hope will catch on, is "Don't Edie Sedgwick me," which is don't jump the gun. Well,
Mhm.
because Arthur is a very good question asker, and so he's asking people,
Interlocutor, if you will.
yeah, interlocutor. I'm just trying to think if I just read that word, because sometimes I mispronounce things because I've only read a word and I think it's pronounced. Did we already talk about that?
Mm-mm.
Interlocutor, did I really? Anyway, yeah.
Well, I confess, I looked that up before I said it,
Uh,
and I'm not even sure I said it right still.
he's
But
really,
anyway, we were on the subject of
okay,
how did we get off on that? I forget. I
because
interrupted you.
you said to it yourself by
Oh,
saying that the lighting issue was meant that I knew what things were going to look like. So, um, have we even gotten to the question about the lighting yet?
no, but I thought we could go ahead and jump into it, sort of your
I'm going to,
technique.
well,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the question that was supposed to be with the lighting was about, like equipment and certain setup and stuff. So yes, one of the things that, not completely unique because I did not invent this photo equipment, but for a rock photographer, it was unusual. That equipment that you saw on the sidewalk, uh, which also, by the way, features in a story about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, I would carry in what looked like a rifle case, an umbrella stand, and a white umbrella. Oh,
Hmm.
and also I could put the light in that rifle case too, which I would then carry over my shoulder.
Hmm.
Um,
Because
And
you worked alone. You didn't have any assistants or anybody to help you carry stuff.
no,
Yeah.
a couple of times I'm laughing because my friend Greg, um, and there will be stories about Greg because he's really good.
Mhm.
He's really bad and he's really good. He's a very interesting guy. Um, Greg accompanied me to the Depeche Mode photo shoot that I did for Musician Magazine. I was like, wow, we are really living it up. And
The big time.
we had a drive to, not Foxwoods, what's the other one that's outside of Massachusetts? It's a big
Great
outdoor,
Woods? Great Woods.
yeah, it was Great Woods.
Hmm.
So they were playing at Great Woods, and this was a cover story for Musician Magazine. And I'm like thinking, yeah, this
That's
is
the big
big
time.
time, yeah. And
So y'all were like
I
drinking
don't know if Greg
champagne in
is,
the back of the limo and
no, we
okay.
get there and uh, you know, I like sometimes, and I'll get into this more, sometimes even though I know the light, it's also about how the light is working in a room. And sometimes it's not working right. It's how it's bouncing off the walls or the umbrella or the people or whatever. It's still not right. And so I was like still kind of trying to make them look good. And someone came out into the room. We were, so Greg he's not really, I don't need much of an assistant because you're right. I mostly worked by myself. So I wasn't used to having somebody else. So it was mostly, to carry the snacks or whatever.
Hmm.
And company if I had a ride to Great Woods. So, um, so I'm like still kind of like trying to move them around and get a good picture of the group. And someone comes in from the management and goes, okay, time's up. I'm like, what?
Had you even taken any photos yet?
I had taken some,
Yeah.
but for this assignment, which was a cover assignment for Musician Magazine, I was like, yeah. And they're
And that's
saying, well,
arranged with the manager. I mean, the management knows that you're doing this for this cover story, which would obviously be important to the band.
not to them, wasn't, nope,
Huh.
because they had Depeche Mode. And
They were nobodies
apparently
back
at
then.
the time, no, they were,
Oh, they were already big. Okay.
they thought, well, I mean, it's Great Woods and they were headlining
Oh,
and
well, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
uh, I, I'm not a Depeche Mode fan, having nothing to do with how they treated me. Uh, More that that's just not my thing. And but they were like, well, you can shoot live now. Feel free to go out and shoot the concert. Like, well,
But
that's not
that's not
what I
what you do.
do, and it's not what I was sent here to do. And
Yeah, that's not going to be likely to be a cover of a magazine, a shot of them performing live, of musician
they did,
anyway.
I mean, musician did use some live shots. I mean, why I was talking about not being a fan, I was like, while I'm watching the show with my friend Greg, who was so-called my assistant at the time, I
Hmm.
was like, it's, what's his name, David? It's David, isn't it?
The
The lead-
singer,
Yeah,
yeah, but I'm blanking on his last name, but yes,
okay, we'll just call him David for now.
sure.
So he's out on the front of the stage and wearing a big fluffy white kind of Edwardian shirt. And the rest of the band is back way up on this wall with their synths. And I'm like, that's a stage show? You've got to love this band. Cause he's like twirling around with his arms out, because I think he still does that. Twirling around in this big fluffy shirt.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's not what I go to see a band for.
Well,
Uh,
the meaning of the band name is Fashion Update. So
yeah,
there you go.
I knew it was something about fashion.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was pretty, and I
Did you
think,
end up getting a cover shot from the original
I
shots
don't
you
think
took?
I got the cover. I did
Uh,
get pictures in the magazine, but
mm.
I don't, and I don't think I was promised the cover. It was a cover
Oh,
story.
okay.
And one would think, being given the opportunity to go to Great Woods and spend some time with them, that a photographer of my knowledge
Caliber.
Caliber, thank you, could have come away with a photograph that would have done the cover, but they kind of screw, I don't think I know. I think I'd know if I had the cover. I don't think I ever had a cover of musician. I
Mhm.
had, I'm happy to say, several Trouser Press covers, which didn't come right away. I had to earn those. Um,
Mhm.
and sorry, I'm gonna now just excuse me, as these things come up. The first time I went to Trouser Press with my portfolio, you know, living in Boston, make the trip to New York to show them my work. And Scott Eisler, who did actually, he probably gave me the job for the Depeche Mode because he
Mhm.
went to musician after Trouser Press.
Oh.
Um, but when I first went to Trouser Press, Scott was acting as the art director.
Mhm.
They later got an art director, Judy Stacconi, who she and I became friends. And yeah, was working with her was really great. Um, but when I first went, I showed the portfolio to Scott, and Scott said to me, well, this is all very well and good, really nice pictures, but why would we use you? We got a bunch of photographers in New York. Like, oh, this is that Yankees Red Sox thing, or
Oh, I
Boston.
thought, do you, so it wasn't that he didn't have an artistic eye and didn't appreciate that it wasn't just a matter of putting a band on a, on film. It was like more artistic in terms of how the photo was taken. He just didn't want to use somebody. He wanted you to prove to him that he should use somebody from Boston.
He was like, why? Yeah, we have New York photographers here in New York. Why would
Mhm.
we use a Boston photographer? Now,
Mhm.
I don't know what Scott would say to you now. I have seen him fairly recently, and he's a sweet guy, and I think he's gotten sweeter. I think he, when I meet him now, he seems more relaxed because he's not working at a magazine. But then yeah, he seemed more stressed about his jobs. And he, he was pretty high up at Trouser Press, and he had a pretty, he was an editor at Musician. So what happened was with Trouser Press, the breakthrough of my not being a New York photographer. Um, Judy comes from California, so when she came on, she didn't have, I don't know if she's a baseball fan either. So she didn't have those prejudices, and I got
Mhm.
more work. But what happened is that they were doing, Trouser Press was doing a story about Boston, the city, Boston bands.
Mhm.
And
Can you remember what year this was?
oh, I'm gonna say 79.
Okay.
I I don't know who's on the cover, but I know that what Scott called me about were pictures of Willie Alexander. They needed Willie Alexander pictures, and I had some.
Mhm. There's one in the book, I believe.
There's a couple in the book, I
Yeah.
think. I
Mhm.
photographed Willie a bunch of times. So, but while he was talking to me, and this was the real breakthrough for me because the people at Trouser Press were not, that whole speech that I gave just now
Mhm.
about Boston being a very important stop for bands. Yeah, they
Mhm.
don't want to hear that. And so while he's asking me about the Boston bands that he needed, and I kind of feel like Willie was the only one I gave him.
They
But
didn't ask for
more
Burma
importantly,
or
I'm sorry, what?
they didn't ask for Burma or neighborhoods, or were
Well,
they
this
playing that?
may have been that they already had pictures
Oh.
from other people. New York photographers possibly.
Oh,
I don't
the
remember,
best.
we'd have to look at the issue. But anyway, what happened is that somehow it came up that they needed pictures of the Fabulous Poodles, a British band.
Oh.
And um, and I had photographed them at the Paradise. And so I was able to provide not just Willie Alexander, but a British band, which at Trouser Press is always more points. Uh, and that like established me as a more viable photographer. And I
Mhm.
will also now add that I, when Rhino Records did that DIY series I'm not really sure how many CDs are in that. It might be 22. It's
Yeah.
a lot of different CDs from different towns, areas, like all kinds of stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, and how I got called for that, I'm going to try to really encapsulate this story that, uh, I was really into Love and Rockets, the comic book,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is drawn by the Hernandez brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Jaime Hernandez was married to the art director at Rhino Records.
Oh, wow.
And he hooked me up with Coco, his then wife. And Coco, when they were doing the Boston CD, she called me to get photographs. I have a bunch of photographs in that Boston DIY series, which is called Mass Ave.
I remember that, but I don't know if they were selling it at Newbury Comics when I was there, but I know I've looked at it, but I need to go back and see your photographs in that. I haven't
Oh
gone
yeah,
through
a
that.
bunch of photographs in that. And it's like this thing with the trouser press. So I said to Coco, so, while I do have a lot of Boston bands, I also have a lot of other bands too. And ultimately, she told me, a while after the DIY series had come out in full, she said I was the single largest supplier of photography for the entire series.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, not just a Boston photographer.
Not
Um,
just.
yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? You know, that's not right that I should have to say, I'm not just a Boston photographer.
Mm-hmm.
I should say, I'm a Boston photographer and you're lucky to know me.
That's right. That's the
So,
attitude you should go into every time you meet with an editor or anyone.
yeah.
You're
Um,
lucky to know me.
Coco was great. And I don't know what she does now. She went to Hippo after Rhino. She went through
No.
all the African, yeah, because I don't remember whose label Hippo was, but it
No,
was,
is there really a label called
oh
Hippo? I don't
yeah,
remember
it's
that.
by a bigger label that was trying to
They were ripping off
copy.
Rhino by and calling themselves Hippo?
They were
Terrible.
emulating Rhino,
Emulating. That's a nice word for it.
hipulating.
As inspired by.
Yeah, right. Um, so what we talking about? Oh, so let's go to the equipment,
Yeah.
the light setup. So here's the thing, is that the light is really what photography is about. Light is the main thing in photography. And that's something I learned from Gary.
Mm-hmm.
He did this thing where and nobody did it, and it really made him mad because nobody, it was very weird because he's a famous photographer. So all the students in the class were like hanging on his every word, but they actually weren't listening to him. But at some point, he gave us this assignment and he said, go set up a bunch of stuff on a table and take pictures of it. Don't move it. Don't do anything at different times of day and see how the light
Hmm.
changing is affecting the photograph. This is what photography is. And so what I really liked was the quality of this light. It's soft, and in some rooms backstage, like the Orpheum, that has these tiny little rooms that were over and over again painted white. I didn't even need the umbrella. The light would bounce all the way
Mhm.
around the room, really like you're having people sitting in a soft box. Those photography things that
Mhm.
the light into, and it softens the
Sure.
light up. So
Sure.
the
You have the
quality of the
endless
light,
horizon behind you. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So, the thing is that the hot lights, when you turn them on, they're incredibly bright. You're in a little room and it's a constant light, really bright. And everybody, my experience would be like, people would go like, whoa, they wouldn't expect that. And then the other thing that would happen is that when I finished shooting and I would turn it off, there was an audible letdown sound. So everybody was surprised, oh my God, too much light. But when I would turn it off, it's like I had taken away.
Oh, the excitement's gone. Yeah.
And, but
So would you have to give everyone like a minute to get acclimated to the light? So they're no.
didn't have a minute. That might have been the minute I was given before the
Wow.
Depeche Mode manager came in and said, you're out of here. So, but the real thing is that the light output of a flash, of a photo flash, is many, many more, if this is the right scientific term, it's many more lumens. It's a
Mhm.
lot more light. Even though this hot light seems so bright, the light that the flash is putting on is much more bright, but it's not affecting her because it's going off at a fraction of a second.
Mhm.
The other very big difference is that when I'm looking through my camera at the light bounced on the wall or in the umbrella, I am seeing the light. I am seeing how it's working in the photograph. When
Mhm.
you are working with a flash, it's a scientific calculation of
Right.
what the exposure is, and you have no idea what the picture actually looks like, because in a 35 millimeter, the mirror goes up for that fraction of a second that your flash goes off. So your viewfinder is even blocked. I mean, it happened so fast, at
Mhm.
125th of a second or 500th of a second, so you wouldn't see much of anything anyway. But your viewfinder is not even available to you at the time that the light is happening.
Well, that's what I think I mentioned earlier. I thought that that was an advantage you had over photographers who use a flash photographer is you knew you were more confident about the picture you were taking each time.
Yeah, but photography is a cruel mistress. And you and you don't, I mean, honestly, you don't really know what you get back until you make a contact sheet. And not
Mhm.
even the contact sheet, because sometimes you make a print from the contact sheet and you're like, oh, that
Wow.
looks so great. Like Gary said, but it was really tiny. That looked
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, the proof is in the photograph,
I'm
at
curious
least
because you
made by
mentioned that
them.
all the photographs in Shameless Distortion, which may have been an editorial choice or it may have been a cost of printing choice, they're all black and white. But you did take color photographs for some.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, and I will address it briefly right now. I'm going to say that I mean, Gary is best known for his black and white. At some point at UT, while I was studying with Gary, the darkroom uh, was redone, and so during that semester, we were working in color. But more importantly, for me, is that the work that Gary showed us was color, and he showed us his color work. Now, Gary was not known for that. And so it's
Mhm.
really a surprise to see his work and to find out that, yeah, he's not only a brilliant black and white photographer, but the color is brilliant too. There's like, and it's etched in my mind from this time. It probably is in a book somewhere, but there was a photograph. This, you don't think of this as Gary at all. There's a picture of a popsicle melting on the ground, like a red popsicle, and the little rivulet of red juice like going down a drain. So on Gary Winogrand, but it's a great photograph. And so what happened to me in terms of color is that, yes, as mentioned, when I started working with these bands, nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew their importance. Trouser Press did, Boston Rock did, certain, oh yeah, I don't want to leave out Sweet Potato because they were actually a serious player.
Sweet potato?
Portland, Maine, yeah.
I don't remember them.
Sorry, that was for my seat pad, in case that was audible. um, Sweet Potato Magazine, yeah. It looked like Boston Rock. It was newspaper mostly, but
Hmm.
I don't know where the deep pockets came from, but that's how I spent half a day with David Byrne during the Fear of Music. Um, and the mystery story about the actor who threw something at me.
We haven't gotten to that. Can we
No,
talk about it now?
but that would, no, just to
Oh,
say that that was arranged through Sweet Potato.
Hmm.
I'm just saying, they had that, that was a movie star. They had that kind of pull. And that
Hmm.
I spent the day I spent with David Byrne, it was a lot of time.
Yeah.
We could have fallen in love, but no. Yeah.
Oh, well. Well, you always had Rick to go back to.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
David probably knew that.
Yeah, I'm sure he knew. Yeah. I'm sure he and Rick talked about you. We're talking about Rick Ocasek, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. And you sort of mentioned this, you never were interested, or at least professionally, in live photography, taking pictures of
Yeah,
bands.
I haven't finished the color thing yet. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No. Edie Sedgwicking me. So the thing about the color is that as people started to know the money power of these bands, that the kids were actually interested in this punk rock, new wave, alternative, all the stuff that happened, that this actually is something that's here to stay. Then magazines who were running color wanted photographs.
Mhm.
So yes, then I started shooting color. But for me, the downside of that, and this is a BC Kagan quote. So I'm doing a photo shoot with a band, shooting black and white and color kind of simultaneously. And I have always said, this is like trying to have a conversation with somebody in French and in English at the same time.
So you would have two
Most
cameras?
notably, I don't speak French.
Yeah. So you would have two cameras, one loaded with color, one with black and white?
Yeah. And then you're switching the lens and you have to remember what's got what and where's went where. And
Mm-hmm.
I have some good color. I have a lot of good color now. It's all of it is so much more historical. You look and you go like, oh, wow. Um,
Have you posted any on your Instagram site,
just this
which
week.
which is?
Oh, Shameless Distortion. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
is the name of, thank you. Just this week, I posted a Joe Strummer. I found her.
Oh, is that a color shot? I saw that. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, I found a role that I had done with Joe when he was Joe. Yeah, well,
Mm-hmm.
um, that I did with Joe when he was touring for Earthquake Weather.
Hmm.
So yeah, I have shown it. The thing that's difficult is, without getting too much into the technical thing, I'm not set up technically to when you shoot color professionally, used to be pre-digital in film, you would use chrome film, which is not a negative. Chrome film is a roll of film that goes through your camera, then gets processed, and the actual picture that be in the little slide is the film that was in
Oh,
your camera.
it's
It's
not a
not
negative image. Oh,
Right,
wow.
exactly. And so those are harder to print. They're easier to print for a magazine for that process, which is why magazines require professional photographers to work with chrome. And it is a sharper kind of color, Kodachrome, which I don't even know if it exists anymore, but the
Mhm.
great exalted chrome film, beautiful film. Yeah, it's a really beautiful film, but there is no negative, and it has to be, the picture that I posted on Instagram. I brought a few things to the lab, and the guy, Justin, who runs the lab, sent me my bill, $700 for just a couple of things I thought I would just print up.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's going to take me a while to pay off. And so the Strummer pictures were scanned and then printed out. It's a digital printing process, not done in the darkroom.
Okay, interesting.
Printed on archival paper. And so, yeah, now I have all this color. I am hoping to, anybody out there listening, you want to send me a few bucks, that you can get an Epson. There is an Epson scanner that will scan, your negatives and scan the chromes. I'm
Mhm.
hoping to get one of those. It's about $350, $375 to buy an Epson scanner. And then I could have more access. It'd be easier, because I wouldn't even have to go into the lab. Part of the expense of, on top of the $700 bill, just getting to the lab, you're physically having to get to the lab. And I'm extraordinarily grateful that the lab that I use on 30th Street in Manhattan exists.
Mhm.
Black and white printer, Kent. I feel now, when I say black and white printer, I am not talking about a machine. I am
Mhm.
talking about a man who stands in a darkroom in front of an enlarger and then dunks your pictures in the chemistry. And it's a skill and that it's not, of course, it's less and less now. And for me, the thing that Kent is, no, I have a particular style that has actually evolved over the years, but my black and white printing style is different than a conventional portrait photographer. Usually conventionally, people have much warmer skin tones for their subject matters. And I would like
Hmm.
to keep things punchy.
Hmm.
So white people were really white. And oh yeah, in the early years when I was doing my own stuff, yeah, these pictures were pretty close to Xeroxes. Black, white,
Hmm.
no gray tones. But
Up the
now,
contrast. Yeah. Yeah. Up the
yeah,
contrast and
yeah,
yeah.
really
Yeah.
punchy.
Yeah.
And because it's rock and roll, but my taste also got more sophisticated, and I started saying, yeah, little skin tone, it's nice.
Mhm.
Um, So anyway, yeah, that's the story with color. I mean, it was good and bad.
Mhm.
For me, talking French and English at the same time. And this goes back again to, what you asked me about my high yield. It's when you're focusing really hard on what you're doing, to have to break that focus to think, do I go to the color film now? Or, it's just another, distraction that, you know. But I am really glad to have come away with a bunch of color pictures that hopefully people will see.
Yeah.
They're just sitting in little slide boxes now. I have beautiful picture, and it's live too.
Mhm.
I photographed Fela. There was a time a couple of years ago that I went online and I could not find a single record of the fact that Fela, I thought he had played at the Wang Center, but it wasn't the
Wow.
Wang Center. It was one of the other
Smaller theaters or
theater right across the street from the Wang Center.
was that the Emerson? What was right across the street from the
Wasn't owned by Emerson then. But at any rate,
yeah.
it didn't matter where it was, because the thing is, it was not showing up at all. And I'm not as good a researcher as Tillman was, but I would get the Suns, shows
Right.
that the Suns did in Boston, but I
Mhm.
could not see any record of Fela, and I was there, saw the
Did
show, was backstage, took pictures of him.
Wow. That's
Um,
awesome. Is that in
yes,
the book?
no,
Yeah, I didn't think there was a picture of him. Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, but I'm about to tell you the real kicker, that while I was there, Marianne Faithful showed up and came backstage because I guess she knew him and they were
Oh.
friends
Ah.
somewhere. And that's color. I shot pictures of the two of them. Like, they're very, oh my
I would love to see those photos.
God.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Eventually they'll show up.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. In the pictures that I have of him, he's very stoned, which is not a surprise to anybody. And he had all of his wives with him, who are so beautifully
Mhm.
dressed, made up and stuff. I haven't seen those for a while, but I did photograph a bunch of the wives. And really, actually, while I was making the book, I think I must have talked to somebody who said, oh no, that wasn't at the Wang, that was at something, and that actually helped me find it. But still, I
Mhm.
mean, I can't believe, that Fela, the father, Fela, was,
Mhm.
played a show in Boston, and I couldn't get it to,
Yeah.
yeah.
To find any documentation of that, like even like a write up in the newspaper or something.
Nothing.
Yeah. Wow.
Until I knew exactly where it was, which now, of
Mhm.
course, I've forgotten. So, but I'd probably be able to Google it now. Perhaps I'm better at that.
Mhm.
So yeah, okay, now we've covered the color thing.
All
How,
right.
how are we
And we
doing?
might, yeah, I think we might want to wrap it up. I think that's probably been about our goal as
2
far as
hour?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And I think that was a good place to end. I think we talked about pretty much everything we had on our agenda.
I'm sorry, I'm looking around for
Where are you looking for?
my copy of the questions. Just in
Okay.
case I think that you really,
And you had some questions for me, I think.
I did.
No, I don't
I
think you
did have
did.
some questions for you.
No, you have
Oh,
no
and I
questions
forgot
for
that
me.
you derailed me right at the beginning. It
Okay.
was,
Uh-oh.
it was something about, um, it was something about the drumming thing. Was it
I
a,
can't imagine you had any questions about drumming for me.
really?
No.
Well, this is not a question, but something I've been meaning to tell you is that I know how to play the drums and I really like it. And
Mhm.
when I think about playing, I think, oh yeah, I should get my bass or, I should, because one of James, what's his last name? Maestro?
Mastro? Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. Um, there is a guitar bar quite close to me. He opened a
Hmm.
few and some of them closed. And I've thought about, oh, I should go and take lessons and,
Hmm.
get better at the guitar and stuff. But my natural, like when I'm listening to something, which I don't do that often, and I'm getting
Hmm.
into it, yeah, I'm drumming. And
Okay.
I went to music camp. That's
Yes.
from American Pie. I went to music camp because my mother was very, very worried that I wasn't going to get into a specialized high school. I went
Hmm.
to a music camp and I had a crush on a boy that a lot of girls had a crush on at that, and I was not the one who won him over that year. I wasn't used to that. But he was a drummer and he taught me how to, play the hi-hat and do the bass and, you know,
On an actual drums or just air drumming?
how good am I at the air drums? No, it was on actual drums. We were at music camp on a
I
stage.
kind of I kind of learned how to play drums air drumming.
Oh, no, these were on real drums.
Nice.
I mean,
You were
very
so
simple,
lucky.
like simple, very simple, which is what I'd want to be
Hmm.
able to play. I'm probably not, I'm not strong enough right now. I I couldn't even get through a whole song. I don't know if people realize, you know, the upper
It's
body
strenuous. Yeah.
involved.
It's an aerobic exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it is. I'm playing guitar is too, but drums
Hmm.
are a certain,
Singing is
the
quite
chest.
aerobic. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
All right.
I didn't think of the question that I was going to ask you. It'll have to be in the future.
Then there will be a future. People should tune in for future
Yes.
or
Yeah.
past
Well,
podcasts.
I don't know if you know about this, Arthur. The podcast is about taking tea with monsters, the stories from my photographing bands.
Hmm.
It's been called that for a long time since I had the epiphany of the people were taking tea with me instead of ripping me a new one.
Hmm.
That's gross. Why would I say that?
Yeah.
Anyway, um, has Raj even come up in our discussion? There is a man named Raj involved in this project. And in a discussion with Raj, I said that I was thinking of actually changing the name of the podcast to Tea Monsters. Because, see, your vote, he voted yes. You're
He
voting,
liked that?
well, I think it was for the simplicity that it
It
might be.
is shorter. He just confirmed for us, for brevity's sake, because a name that takes 1 second to say instead of two is probably better for.
But so your vote is, I mean, I was wondering if it would be confusing because I am not letting go of the Taking Tea with Monster name. It's
Hmm.
still the name of the collection of stories.
tea monsters is not it's not logical to me. Now, monsters tea with an apostrophe after the monsters, like it's possessive. Monsters tea makes more sense to me. Like monsters ball, but monsters tea.
Yeah,
And
gotcha.
now that I'm saying monsters, it sounds weird when I say it. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
It's probably because you need a nap.
I think it's probably I need another glass of wine. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up on that.
Okay, so it'll have in the title of the next thing that you get from us, we'll have the word tea and it'll have the word monsters.
In some order, and yes, okay. Fair enough.
Exactly. All right, thanks. Are we doing the fake laugh now?
Okay, here we go.